everyone. Today, I will give you some practice strategies. I love to practice. It's actually one of my favorite things to do, of course, next to performing. So I thought in this video, I will share with you what I share with my students in the hopes that this will help you in broadening your practice toolbox. So these are some very simple strategies, and I guarantee you, I think they will help improve your practicing and will allow you to do more in a smaller amount of time. So number one, make sure you pick the right time to practice for you. Now, what does that mean? Some of us are morning people. I'm a morning person. I practice in the morning. Some of us are night owls. And I've had students who practice at 1 a.m. and that works for them. Doesn't work for me, but make sure you know when you are most focused and when you are most alert and can really use your full intellectual ability and full physical stamina to perform the most successful practicing during the day. And practice that. If you are not a morning person, don't practice at 7 a.m. If you're not a night person, don't practice at midnight. I would do that because it is pointless. At that point, I just need to go to bed. So that's number one, when you practice. The second thing is, make sure that you are spreading your practicing throughout the day. So for example, if you are, say, practicing 4 hours a day, make sure you practice, say, 2 hours in the morning, maybe 1 hour in the afternoon, 1 hour at night, or 1 hour in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 2 hours at night, whatever that may be. You need to give yourself a mental break as well as a physical break so that when you come back to practicing, you are refreshed and you're more focused, you can do more, your muscles have rested, and also you keep refreshing and rehashing the information that you learned to make it more in your memory. So, and I also like to tell students, you don't need a whole hour to go into a practice room. If you're working on a concept and you have 10 minutes before class and say you memorized half a page, run into that practice room and see if you can play it. That's a really good way to practice. Sometimes the least amount of time we have, the more we accomplish. I like to tell the story of when I was at the Aspen Music Festival. There was 1 week where I didn't have a lot of time to practice between the commitments I had, but also because it was really hard to get a practice room because everybody was practicing. So I was practicing, a very limited amount of time, and I was able to learn and memorize a Liszt Transcendental Etude in 1 week because my practice sessions were very focused and targeted, which I'll talk about. Now, make sure that when you're going into a practice session, you have goals. So it's not, I'm going to practice this piece for X amount of time. It's what am I going to actually achieve with this work? And that is the question that you need to ask yourself before a practice session, and then after the practice session. If you can't answer what did you actually achieve, that means you just wasted that time. So make sure you have specific target goals. I'm going to learn this page, I'm going to memorize this page, I'm going to work on this passage, I'm going to practice this in rhythms, I'm going to see if I can really work on the dynamics here. Whatever that goal is, pedaling, for example, make sure that it is very clear before you start to practice so that every session has a targeted goal that you are achieving. It works, and it just makes things a lot easier for you in terms of learning a lot of rep in a short amount of time. Make sure that your practice time is actually a part of your daily schedule. It is programmed in your calendar, as in if you're a college student, you have history class at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. is your practice hour. And then when you get out of your class, you say 11 o'clock is your practice hour. So that's a part of your day. And what I like to tell my students is practice time is sacred. That time does not get shifted for anything. If your friends want to go have coffee, want to go somewhere, you just say, no, this is my practice time. Because I think the worst mistake the students make is they don't think of their practice time as something in their schedule. They think about it as homework. So they go through the day, they go to class, they go to work, they go to whatever at night, they do their homework, and then at 10 p.m. like, okay, I gotta practice, it's a part of my homework. No. Practicing is homework in as far as it's something you have to do, but it's not homework as far as you can do it after everything else. No. It has to be something you do every day, just like, athletes practice on a regular schedule. We must practice on a regular schedule, and we must fight for that time and defend it against anyone else who tries to claim it from us. So that's very important. When you go into your practice session, make sure you target the thing that you're working on first. So first you warm up, of course, whatever that may be, scales, canons, etudes, or whatever your favorite thing is. Mine is scales and arpeggios, for example. But when you start practicing, go to whatever it is you're trying to achieve first, when you're most alert, most focused, you have the most energy, the most physical stamina. If it's memorization of a specific portion piece, go there, memorize it. If it's practicing that a specific portion piece, go there, memorize it. Unless it's something extremely technically difficult that you need to really warm up your hands for a serious amount of time before you play. That's the only exception. But other than that, go straight there so you can get that thing done. And then when you are more tired toward the end of your session, you can review things that do not need as much attention at that particular moment. That is my suggestion. Speaking of being mentally alert, make sure that when you are practicing, you are fully present in what you're doing. Do not practice if you're tired, take a nap, go to bed, whatever it is, not productive. Do not practice if you're hungry, go have lunch. I always tell students, it has to be a full presence, mental presence, physical presence, so that you can really achieve things. Don't just sit there and go like, well, I was here for an hour and I got nothing done. That is not productive. You know, there's a saying that practice makes things permanent, and I really like that saying. So if you're practicing things with your brain out to lunch, then you are really making things probably wrong, and then you're kind of retaining that incorrect way of playing it, and it's going to be a lot harder to relearn. So I always tell students, if you're tired, take a nap. If you're hungry, go eat. And one of my biggest advices before performance, the day of the performance, just take a nap, rest. It's not the time to make major changes to your piece. And you know, I have students who are like, "Oh, I'm just going to stay up all night practicing." Not a good strategy. Being physically, mentally awake and present is very important. And one thing I'd like to address today that I talk with my students a lot about is mental practice. So practicing away from the piano. And that is something that I think a lot of us have done as kids. I never thought about it, and I started thinking about it more when I started teaching full-time in college, because I realized not everybody did it. And so a couple of tips about practicing away from the piano. So that is literally when you are not next to an instrument. There are certain things that you can do to really learn, and particularly for us as pianists, memorize the music that you need to memorize. Number one, studying the score. Everything you need to know about a piece is in the score. The musical notation system is genius. The composers who pass down their works to us really thought a lot about how they want them played, and they have actually put that into our wonderful notation system. So we can actually have everything we need from them in that score. So studying the score is essential. And you'll be surprised at what kinds of things you'll find if you're studying the score away from the piano. Like if you're sitting out on the lawn and studying the score, you're going to find dynamic markings you probably didn't see. You're going to find articulation markings. You're going to find a pedal marking. You know, all these things that will really help you make the piece better. You can harmonically analyze a score. You can formally, of course, analyze a score, especially if it's something like a sonata. You should definitely do that. And if you are a visual learner like myself, when I memorize music, I literally photograph it in my brain. And so that is one way you can practice that was going to really, really reinforce your memory, is just studying the score, memorizing away from the piano. Now, I'd like to reinforce that, of course, this does not take the place of also practicing. You still have to practice, because there is muscle memory, there is response, there's certain positions you're trying to shoot. You still have to practice. But this is something you can do in addition. So if you're practicing, say, 4 hours a day, physically on the piano, you can also spend an hour or 2 hours a day practicing mentally. So that's one, is studying the score. The second one is listening to recordings. And I like to be very clear about that. You're not listening to the recordings to copy them. You're listening to the recordings to get a sense of the piece, and also to see what you like or don't like about the performance. And I have all my students do this: listen to recordings. If you like something, go ahead and steal it, borrow it for your own performance. If you don't like something, make sure you're not doing that in your performance. So kind of critically listening, analyzing scores. It's so easy now with YouTube, so many recordings available. And I think you can learn something from any recording, professional or non-professional. I think you can learn. And as you're mentally practicing, you can listen to the recording with the score, and that reinforces your understanding of the piece. both of your memories, both the visual and the audio. And it is really a good way to learn repertoire in a fast amount of time. I'll speak from my own experience. When I was doing my doctorate degree, I had only several months to learn a recital program. My first doctoral recital was at the very beginning of April, and I started learning the program in November because I had to do another recital before that. And so I was also overcoming an injury, and so I really couldn't practice physically as much as I really needed to play this concert. But what I did is I put myself on a recording/score diet, and I would go to the music library every morning. So I would practice first thing, and then starting at 10 a.m., I would go to the music library and I would check out the recordings of the pieces I was playing. And from 10 to noon, I was in a listening room, listening to those recordings with my scores over and over and over again, just learning as much as I could that way. And guess what? I was able to play that concert, and it went really well. And at the time, I was like, am I really going to do this? But once you had the concert date, you couldn't really change it because the hall was so booked up. So I knew I was committed and I was doing it, but it worked. So listening 2 hours a day, and of course, those of you sitting here like, well, why didn't you listen to it on your phone? Why didn't you buy the recordings? But it was, for me, it was that, as I was telling you, having a dedicated practice time, it was that dedication of, for 2 hours every morning, I'm going to physically go there, I'm going to turn off my cell phone, I'm going to just sit there and I'm going to listen to these recordings, look at these scores, and that's all I'm going to be doing. And that was the commitment I made, and that's why I think why it worked. That's what I mean by the dedicated practice time. When you have your dedicated practice time, turn off your cell phone. Do not, go on social media. This is your time to practice. But having said that, do take breaks. Do take practice breaks to kind of freshen your mind. Go have a drink of water, walk around the hallway. That's useful too. So practicing recordings while looking at scores, it is a really good strategy, and it works, guys. And then the other type of practicing you can do once you've memorized the piece is listening to the recording and seeing if you can play the score, but away from the piano, just in your head. See if you can run the score. And I like to do that when I'm driving. Don't do that, guys, but if I'm in my car, I have my CD player and I have the piece that I'm playing, I'm just running that score with the recording and see if I can follow it. And any gray areas that I can't remember, that's when I go and I look and I reinforce them. And finally, the final type of mental practice is when you don't have a piano, don't have a score, don't have a recording, you have memorized your work, and you're sitting there, in the gazebo, and you're just running through the work in your head, seeing if you can remember it. And for me as a visual person, if I can see the score just running in front of my eyes. And if you're walking around campus, it's a great thing to do. And if you can do that, whatever parts are hazy or whatever, you can go back and find them. But once you are able to do that, that means you actually know the work, you've memorized the work, and it'll be so much easier for you to perform it because it's psychological reinforcement that you know it. And I like to tell students that memory is sort of like a coloring book. You color this part in, you color this part in, you color this part in, and eventually you're going to color in the whole picture. Of course, you're going to have to keep coloring. Some once you memorize something that's there, but it is that kind of mental practice. Just running the score in your head is a great way to know if you really know the piece. So I do suggest this. So studying the score with a recording, running the recording with the score, just kind of going through your mind. And if you don't have a visual memory, just if you can hear it, see if you have more tactile memory, see if you can imagine playing it. There's so many different things you can do. And then of course trying to run the score without a recording, without a score, without a piano. And finally, I like to talk a little bit about preparing for performances. A lot of times people are like, I've practiced this piece for a million hours, I know it really well, I get into a performance situation, I get nervous, I can't write. Well, I like to just make this public service announcement. Performing is a separate thing from just playing a work. And to prepare for performance, you have to practice performing. There's no way around it, right? There's not a magic pill. You can play something perfectly in your practice room. It doesn't mean you're ready for performance. To prepare for performance, you have to perform the work in past practices as much as you are able to. So I always tell students, you have naturally built into your kind of weekly piano schedule, your piano lesson. When you have a piece prepared, memorized, don't go into your lesson with the pieces the first thing. Play for your friends first, so that way you have a less pressure situation. And then you play for your teacher. And then I'm sure your teacher will have some kind of studio class or some kind of a way for you to play for classmates. Take advantage of those, play as much as you can if you're ready. Any kind of a more informal performance, seek out performance opportunities. There's plenty of places you can play in the community, retirement homes, schools, maybe community events. They are eager for performances. They love classical music. It's very low pressure. For example, like an art gallery opening where people walking around, drinking wine, eating cheese. They're not really listening to you, but they're there. I always send my students to those kinds of opportunities. I myself had a huge retirement home following when I was in college because I was always there performing. And in one funny story, I was late because there was traffic. It was in Nashville and Toronto, and I was literally half an hour late, and I showed up and I was so embarrassed. This is before I had a cell phone. I couldn't call them, and they were all sitting there like, "It's okay, Julia, we knew you were coming. We love your performances." We would sit there and wait for you all night if we had to. And that was the most touching moment when I had this fan base in a retirement home. Because I just would go and try out my rep there so much when I played concerts. So lots of opportunities to do that. Do take advantage of them. My rule is have at least 3 practice performances before you go on stage in a more formal setting. That really is, I think, the key. And if you use the mental strategies I talked to you before, that will really help. Make sure you're really rested on the day of the performance. Make sure that you're eating a good diet. Make sure you are not stressing yourself out in whatever way that's not needed to be there. And I can talk more about what you do during your performance or how to prepare mentally for performance outside knowing your piece. So centering techniques, there's a really great website called bulletproofmusician.com. Noel Kagayama, he is a wonderful psychologist who deals with performance, overcoming performance anxiety, not really overcoming, but really kind of riding the wave, so using the adrenaline to perform your best. I'm a big advocate of that. I can speak more to that. But I think these are some simple tools that hopefully you guys can use. If you'd like me to speak about anything in more depth, I would love to do that. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.